Thank you, Chris. So, like Chris said, my name is Lev. I am the head of intelligence at Sqope. I'll talk about myself briefly and also about our company, just so it's good to get a general understanding of who it is that's speaking. On a personal level, I was a bit about my background. I was born in Russia when it was still the Soviet Union. Then I moved to the US, spent about 20 years there, so most of my life, but I've also been living in Israel for the past 10 years. I came here for my master's program, which I completed at Tel Aviv University, and then I stuck around for personal and professional reasons. I spent most of my career in the field of intelligence in one way or the other, in academia as an analyst for a private geopolitical company. And I also worked for the United Nations as a civil military coordinator. And for about the past year and a half, I've taken the research and managerial background of mine and converted it to the AML and KYC world, which is what I'm doing here at Sqope. And just a bit about Sqope. As it's clear, we're an enhanced due diligence company. We provide KYC, anti-money laundering reports for our clients to meet their regulations. Namely, in Europe, we have clients in over 20 jurisdictions. The majority of them are in Europe, about 250, a bit over 250 clients, and they're spread throughout the continent, but also in other financial hubs, such as in the UAE. We have clients in the US, obviously in Israel as well, and Singapore, Africa, and some other places. But majority of ours are in Europe, and they're abiding by EU anti-money laundering regulations, which Chris will touch about briefly as well. And we also provide ESG reputation assessments. This is something that's a really growing need of our clients and growing demand, and something that we've been covering for many years, but we started providing as a separate report only in 2021. We're also, of course, providing these reports in a fully GDPR compliant way, naturally, as almost all of our clients are in Europe. It's extremely important for them and extremely important for us. In the course of our work, which we've been doing for just over 10 years now, since 2009, we've covered almost every country in the world in our research. And we've also developed a team of analysts who come from a variety of backgrounds. They're also spread throughout the world. We as Sqope are based in Luxembourg, but our research team is headquartered in Tel Aviv. That said, about 80% of us are not in Israel, and just spread throughout the world in Asia and Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and Europe as well. And among them, they speak over 20 different languages. And that's really the strength of what we produce. Our research is dependent on our human capital. They do obviously use they're supported by technology, by various data mining tools, by various digital databases. And we also utilize private investigators on the ground who help us a ton with our research. But the majority of our work and the added value that we have is the people that we use, and their backgrounds tend to be in military intelligence, investigative journalism, academia, and also from private intelligence organizations as well. I can obviously go on and on about what we do at Sqope, but I'd love to give Chris an opportunity to introduce himself and Kerberos, which we're happy to partner with now.
Thank you, Lev. Yeah, my name is Christopher Trippe, and I'm the head of intelligence at Kerberos Compliance and leading the intelligence department since 2019. And we are helping our clients basically with the identification and check of their business partners. Before my current position, I worked for Big Four audit companies for numerous years, doing compliance consulting like CMS audits, implementation, as well as fraud investigations and intelligence work as well. As for my education, I hold a Master of Laws degree and have also studied theology and economics before. As I said, I work for Kerberos Compliance, and Kerberos is a AML service provider founded in 2017 and based in Cologne, Germany. We are a one-stop shop for AML compliance, and therefore providing services such as AML risk analysis. We are helping our clients with their obligation concerning the money laundering reporting officer. We are doing transaction monitoring and, as I said before, intelligence services. We are currently engaged in about 11 industries, both financial and non-financial, and we manage more than 1,500 obligated parties and over 2,500 point of sales. And as of now, we also had more than 200 successful authority audits. We are a team of over 60 employees with a variety of backgrounds, such as we have lawyers, we have economists, we have data analysts, and social scientists as well. In case of further questions, feel free to reach out to me. You will find our contacts at the end of the presentation. And then, without further ado, let's actually start with what actually is due diligence. Generally speaking, a due diligence process is a way to identify a customer or a business partner before the transaction is completed or before a business partnership is formed. The goal of a due diligence is to confirm that a client or clients are who they say they are and to ensure that they are not involved in criminal activities. Sometimes terms like AML process or KYC, know your customer, are also be used, and that's all the same process. A due diligence check is therefore a mixture of different checks and searches to assess the risk a client may pose. And that includes, among other things, the verification of ID documents, identification of the beneficial owner, screening of PEP or sanction lists. And what actually a due diligence is, or why we do due diligence. In principle, there are two reasons why we do a due diligence or why a due diligence is necessary. The first reason is that it is a legal requirement for a whole range of different industries. And the aim is basically to reduce the risk of money laundering, terrorist financing, and other illicit activities. In addition to that, there are increasing audits by AML supervisory authorities, and shortcomings can be sanctioned with heavy fines, so you will probably avoid that. The second reason, a fairly important point in my opinion, is it should be in a company's own interest to know their business partner. Because they can minimize their own financial risk, they can avoid reputational risk, because if a business partner is involved in some questionable activities and practices, it can have also a negative impact on your own company. So in a nutshell, two reasons why due diligence is necessary. First, there are legal requirements. And second, it's just smart business to know with whom you're dealing with, right? Following, I'd like to define a couple of key terms to better understand what we are talking about today. The first term being the UBO, or the ultimate beneficial owner. And that is the natural person that finally benefits from the business of a company. Therefore, the beneficial owner can be described as a person who controls the company, even through different other holding companies, and who basically sits atop of a tree, or top of the tree. Therefore, identifying the UBO of a business partner is one of the most important points of a due diligence or KYC check, because knowing the identity of a person who ultimately have the economic interest in a business relationship is definitely extremely important to be able to assess the respective risk. However, often problems are encountered here because a UBO can hide behind complex company structure or can hide behind non-transparent structures, especially if a company resides in a tax haven. Beside of that, there are other important checks who must be performed, such as PEP or sanction list checks. A PEP is a politically exposed person, and that is a person who holds or has held a high-ranking public position. And the reason why a PEP must be checked is because doing business with a politically exposed person carries an increased risk of money laundering, as they are more likely to have the ability to embezzle funds or be corruptible. However, a politically exposed person should in no way be seen as a potential criminal per se, nor is doing business with them reprehensible. You only have to do enhanced measures to minimize the risk, and then you obviously have to go from there and have to look what you find out. But you don't have to be, or you don't have to avoid business with politically exposed persons. It's a little bit different with the sanction lists, because a sanction list is published by a state authority or an international institution, and they contain companies or individuals who have been involved in illegal activities. And the aim of these lists is to prevent such actors from participating in economic traffic. Therefore, business should be or must be avoided. Otherwise, you will probably be subject to heavy fines. And that needs to be avoided. So after we have defined a couple of key terms, I'd like to point out ways to actually find information concerning our targets. And that brings us to open source intelligence. And open source intelligence, or OSINT, is a research technique to get and verify information from publicly available sources. Obviously, there are a large variety of different sources, and sometimes you even must be creative to find information. I think my colleague Lev will go into that a little bit deeper. However, there are a couple of types of sources you can define, and those are basically search engines, public register, commercial databases, social media, and internet forums. And I'd like to explain this a little bit in detail. So basically, a search engine simply carries out web searches, right? We all know probably Google. So you can search for a variety of things like websites, articles, images. And those online searches can deliver a wide range of results, and not all of them relevant. So you have to narrow down your search, and you can narrow it down by combining your target with specific search terms, such as, for example, crime. I think Lev will cover that in a bit. However, when you're using search engines, you have to be aware that there is a search engine bias, which basically means that the results displayed are not only related to the search criteria, but also on what Google, for example, thinks you want to see. Also, Lev will cover that in a bit. The last part, the best known search engine is Google, as I said before, but there are in particular in some countries other probably better option, for example, Baidu in China or Yandex in Russia. So you have to be aware of that as well. The second source you can use are public registers. Public register basically collects information and documents about companies which are resided in a particular country. And you will usually find information such the official name, the registry number, the registered office, directors, shareholders, or the purpose, the business purpose. However, there are significant differences between public registers. Some are freely accessible. Other register can only be accessed after registration, and in addition, some register are very difficult to access, or even they are not even available online, especially in tax haven again. You can also use, to gather information, you can also use commercial databases. And they are basically two kinds of commercial databases, company databases and press databases. A company database basically crawled information from different sources concerning a company and then makes these information accessible for the customer. A press database, on the other hand, collects numerous news articles and other press releases and make them available to the customer. And user usually have the ability to search with different search terms. You can also do it similar to when you're using a search engine and combine your actual target with search terms. And the advantage by using a press database over a normal search engine is usually the extent of sources and articles available. And then two other sources, so to speak. One is social media, and by analyzing social media profiles, you will often find private information, and depending on the scope of the profile, you can draw a conclusion on the place of residence, for example. You can draw conclusions on the interests and family members and friends. And you can use social media to basically cross-verify information you already have by combine it with other sources. And that method you can also use when you're using internet forums, because an internet forum can be an additional source of information, right? But you have to be careful, because usually an internet forum is not suitable as the only source, because you can write anonymously in there. So you have to be careful there as well, and you can use those information basically to cross-verify information you already have. And then the last place where you find information is the deep web. And the deep web is basically the part of the internet that cannot be captured or found by a normal search engine. And it's estimated that it's about 90% of the entire internet, even more sometimes. And deep web consists basically of databases, legal documents, government records, scientific reports, academic records, and stuff like that. You have about a couple of opportunities to search a deep web. You can use a specific search engine to search a deep web, or you simply have to know where to find what you're searching for. So, for example, if you like to verify whether a person actually holds a PhD or not, you have to know where to look at. For example, the university's list of the PhD alumni, or you can search the library for the PhD thesis to verify whether a person actually holds a PhD or not. Yeah, and basically just don't confuse the dark web, the deep web with the dark web. Because the dark web is a little bit different again, because it's a highly protected and anonymized part of the deep web, and you can access the dark web definitely just by using a specific browser to access the dark web. So, with that said, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Lev, who will cover a little bit more in detail how to actually perform due diligence and intelligence work. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. That was really useful. And, I think it's really good. It's a really nice breakdown of, everything, why we do due diligence, what exactly goes into it, and kind of the terms are really necessary. And also, just for the audience, these terms will come up, periodically throughout the presentation. So it's good to have an intro to them. I want to touch on just kind of, there's a lot of terms that are sort of interchangeable in our industry. And one of them you'll see from that I'll be doing, that I'll be using interchangeably is OSINT and WEBINT. So I'll try not to do that, as well as, KYC and DDs and due diligence and things like that. So I want to just briefly talk about why we do enhanced due diligence as well. So much of what Chris spoke about is related to enhanced due diligence. Much of it goes into specifically enhanced due diligence. And of course, due diligence is necessary even for smaller transactions, even for a low profile and your average sort of client for a financial institution. Enhanced due diligence is necessary for high risk individuals, and that there's various sort of metrics to determine what is high risk or what qualifies someone as being high risk. It can have to do with his or her sector that they operate in, the country that they are from or that they operate in, their political exposure level, and various things like that. And when someone does come across as high risk, then clients need to do enhanced due diligence. And this requires going beyond what you can find in some of the tools that are used for regular due diligence, some of the kind of more automated tools that basically give you the checkbox approach, which is the person a PEP, are they on sanctions list or not? And typically when you do enhanced due diligence, if you do it thoroughly, you will require experienced analysts, those that take the time and really dig through all the information and verify everything in order to get to the bottom line. Can you or should you not do business with this client or this prospect? So a lot of times it's really taking the information that you find in the general due diligence process, and then you need to evaluate and confirm it. And the reason that we're talking about enhanced due diligence today in the format of using WEBINT for it is because much of it really can be done online. I mentioned earlier that we use a lot of ground sources as well, but a lot of what we do is done basically through our computers. And so even though it is important to have good ground sources, I just want to talk about the element of using the internet for it. So with that, I just want to give you a bit of a introduction to what we call the OSINT landscape. And like I said, there's a lot of interchangeable terms. OSINT is one of them. This is better to be called WEBINT, which is web intelligence, because open source intelligence can include collecting records from a physical office or a physical register in a different country. So it just kind of goes to show how broad the different kinds of tools that you have available to you are. Chris mentioned different search engines, and here you have at least, I guess, around a dozen from different countries, multiple for the same country. There's different ways of finding satellite imagery. There are ways to find web cameras in different locations. You can find, there are ways to even track license plates in different countries. It's sort of jurisdictional dependent. You can even file down Facebook and other social media platforms beyond the way that most people use it. Most people can just go into Facebook and search something there, but there are tools to really search within Facebook to a deeper level. So I'm not gonna get into all of these, but the reason I show this is because I was told a long time ago by one of my earlier mentors that almost anything that you want, you can find online. And I found this to largely be true. And with the help of these types of tools and many, many others, and also what's more important is generally a creative and curious mind, you really can do a lot online. And I am going to start with Google. This applies to what I'm talking about now, will apply to Google and other search engines as well. But I'm going to start with it because it is, as many people say, just Google it. It's a very funny answer when someone asks a question, but it actually is very legitimate. There is a lot of things you can find through Google. Google is a leader in the search engine world, and you really should. It should be one of your starting points. When we do preliminary research on someone in order to, give our clients recommendations on how to proceed, Google is, one of the parts of the process for us. But as Chris mentioned earlier, there's a huge difference of what Google shows you versus what it is that you were looking for in the first place. And really what they're doing is they're showing you what they think that you want to see. And a lot of times it makes sense. If you're looking for a bike store and you just type in bike store, Google will show you bike stores in your area, because it's unlikely that me in Tel Aviv is looking for a bike store in Cologne, Germany, unless I'm visiting Chris, of course. And it makes sense. And then obviously they take that into consideration. They take your previous searches, they take your friends' searches, they take what companies are paying to list to have higher up in the results. So basically our searches would look different. But there is a way to fix it. So I like to call this correcting the bias. In the sort of OSINT WEBINT world, you can call this Google dorking. I'm only giving a few examples here. I will suggest that if you're using Google for your own research to go a bit further, and you can just basically Google dorking or Google Bouldorn searches, which is the things you find here. And it will show you, you'll find a list of different ways to manipulate the search results from Google, essentially. So one of the common ways of doing this, for instance, that we use a lot is narrowing the search to a very specific name. If you're looking for a John Smith and you find so many, you can narrow it down to John Adam Smith. So that's just one of the ways of doing it. And there's ways you can also just put John asterisk Smith into Google or whatever search engine you're doing to find anytime John and Smith are mentioned together with another name between. This is if you want to find any John Smith that has a middle name, for instance, just for example. One thing that we do very regularly, and we've collected search terms in most relevant or in all relevant languages, is we combine names and search terms. And if you want to look for someone in a particular topic, like let's say you're looking up a celebrity that has a lot of information written about them, but you're not interested in their recent participation in an award show. You might be interested in their criminal activity or their past relationship with someone. You'll put the basic term you're looking in quotes, as well as the name in quotes. You can also look for a name in a specific website if you're looking to see if they were mentioned in a website that you're used to checking, because sometimes the internal search engines within a site like ICIJ or Forbes might not be so great. If I want to see if someone's listed in Forbes, which is valuable information, you can put their name, site, colon, and then Forbes.com, for instance. You can also, what's really good is look for a person in trusted websites. So not just Google, but Google News, Google Scholar. You can also look for a subject or a topic written within a type of file, like a PDF or an Excel, just by doing the parameter here. So that's one of the means. Another thing I want to point out is, well, I wanted to show you an example. So for instance, if you're searching for a John Lennon, let's say this person actually exists, and you type it into Google, you might get results for, or you will get results for John Lennon, because that's exactly what Google thinks you're looking for. But if you put John Lennon in quotes, you will actually have the results that you were initially looking for, which is John Lennon. Even though Google will suggest for you to maybe change it to John Lennon. So this is kind of a battle of wills between you and Google. Another way of correcting the bias is by searching within a specific region. So for instance, if you're looking for information about someone in Venezuela, it makes more sense to search for them in Venezuela, because like I said, Google also gives you results based on where you're located. If you just pretend that you're located in Venezuela, then you'll have different results. And you can actually see that as an example right here. If we look for this gentleman from our current region, which was Israel when we did this example, we have different sources than if we search for them from Venezuela. And it might seem like a very small trick, but these sort of things really make a difference, and you'll have exposure to a very different range of results that can really shape the way your research unfolds. Another option, and I think this is incredibly important, and it really helps to narrow down your search, is to limit the date range. So for instance, I use this example because there's a lot of noise obviously about any president, but if you are researching Donald Trump, but you're not interested in his presidential years, you're, for instance, doing a biography of him prior to, or if you're doing a source of wealth report on him and you want to understand how he accumulated his wealth, and you're not interested in his presidential years. If you type in Donald Trump, including Donald Trump wealth, or Donald Trump in quotes and wealth in quotes, you're going to find a lot of things that came out after he began his candidacy and then his tenure as president of the US. But if you limit the search to prior to 2014, for instance, you'll find a whole different profile on Donald Trump. So it's very important to do this. When we're investigating someone and we find a lead about an event that took place in their lives, or that they were involved in, let's say in 2010, we will narrow down the search to that time period typically, unless we feel that we need to see how it unfolded afterwards. We also mentioned earlier about using different search engines altogether, and this is really great. So like I said, I mentioned pretending, so to speak, that we're in Venezuela when searching a Venezuelan subject. Another thing you can do is actually use the local search engine when available. So in the case of Russia, I know I have a lot of family still there. I know they don't really Google things so much there. To be quite honest, they're more likely to use Yandex Maps, Yandex Images, and things like that. So that means that their Yandex is going to do a better job of providing you with results for a subject based in the former Soviet Union. So you should use both. Just because one gives you a particular range of results doesn't mean you should dismiss the other at all. It's more important to just use both to get a full spectrum of results. So another thing that's very important to do when conducting due diligence, especially if you're operating in a new region, or if you have a subject from a country that you're not familiar with, is to understand. And when I say that, I mean that you're often going to get results from sources that you're not familiar with, not just because he's from an unfamiliar country. The sources aren't necessarily going to be BBC or others like that. You need to ask yourself, is this source biased or is it credible? Now, there's a number of ways of doing this. There's also service providers that check this for you for free. You can go to mediabiasfactcheck.com and put in the name of a source, and it will give you a result. As you see here, they rated RT.com as a bit right of center, so towards the right wing, and with very low factual reporting. Now, this could be useful, but it doesn't really tell you enough. It's fine to do if you're in a squeeze, but it's really better to do it on your own. And one of the reasons this is important, in addition to conducting your own research and understanding who is writing about whatever it is that you're reading, it's important, at least in our case, to provide our clients with that kind of understanding. Well, we're providing with this information, but it's from a biased source potentially. So you can use these tools, but I recommend kind of coming to that conclusion on your own, which takes more time, but it gets you better results. This means evaluating what kind of language is used. Do the articles there seem opinionated? Do they sound outlandish? Do they seem to include adjectives that are unnecessary for the sake of that article? Do they seem like they're trying to push a particular narrative in all their other articles? These are the things that you might do already in your personal life, but in the due diligence world, it's actually it's very important. And again, I mentioned earlier that when you do enhanced due diligence, you're doing it because the subject is higher risk, and oftentimes it is because they're from a higher risk country, which might mean that it's outside of the scope of your background and experience. And in that case, you really need to do this kind of evaluation, or you won't really understand what you're reading and the veracity of the information they're providing you. Part of this is also understanding that, especially in a lot of the countries that we cover, there are actually paid negative PR campaigns. And this is important to understand. It's important to realize that even if you're reading from what might seem like a legitimate source, that it might be something, it might have been produced by a company that's paid to create a negative image about the person you're investigating. And you'll see that in many ways. Again, some of this might seem obvious. You might have ran across this on your own. But we've seen it a lot, especially in former Soviet Union countries, where the articles will have a very mocking tone. They'll have dozens of articles that attack a specific fact about the person's biography, and it might come off as sort of irrelevant. Like, why are they bringing this up? Is it pertinent? It doesn't seem like it's connected to something. It seems like they're just trying to push a very specific narrative. I sometimes give the example of, in Israel, for instance, we have a politician named Avigdor Lieberman, who during his college years was a bouncer. And I find that articles that are against this politician, when they write about him, they always mention this, which is usually kind of irrelevant. When they talk about a 60-year-old politician, they'll say the former bouncer. It's not part of a paid PR campaign. Obviously, sometimes this is very organic and people are just presenting their own political biases or leanings, but these are the kind of things you'll also see in a paid negative campaign. Oftentimes, these articles will be posted on different platforms with no changes or slight changes, which is just an effort to kind of push the idea. The articles will be translated into Western languages in order to appear in those databases. And Chris also mentioned earlier media tools that kind of scrape the media and present you sometimes basically the tone of the internet towards this individual. And a lot of times this can be manipulated. So if you post a lot of negative articles, then eventually when you put someone through one of these databases, the algorithms will present this person as having a negative media profile. So sometimes this is used as a tool of blackmail against politicians, and we have seen this. Another thing that might be surprising is fake references to credible sources, even when the article doesn't exist. So you might have an article attacking someone and saying that researchers or I don't know, the FBI released a dossier saying that Hillary Clinton did X, Y, and Z, when in fact that you can't find information about that article. It's just that most people won't check. So it'll be kept in their mind that there was some kind of dossier about this person, but it never actually existed. So it's important to check these sort of things and be aware that paid negative PR campaigns are a thing. Another thing I wanted to bring up, which after discussing the credibility of sources and also the bias in sources, one thing that's really important is to ask yourself, does something being biased doesn't mean that it's fake? And I say this because you can often read, especially a lot of times this is necessary when you're covering a country with very poor press freedom. You might find a lot of biased articles, but they have information that is accurate in them. So if you take, for instance, from this range of different media outlets, if you take someone from the far left, let's say in this case, The Intercept versus Breitbart, they might cover the same protest, they might cover the same event. How they present the details of that event might be very different, or how they present the details of a certain court case. If it comes to the kind of due diligence that we do, they might be very different. At the same time, they still will present basic facts that will give you a lead. And while you can't take more from these articles because they might be biased, you can take the lead and do your own external investigation on your own. In order to do this, you would look for similar stories and just compare what is consistent in the different articles. You would read the comments in the articles themselves, because a lot of times people will include additional information. And you can also check social media about that particular event. You can type it into Twitter or something like that, and you'll find people discussing the event. So I'm going to use that to segue into social media, which is also a very important part of your KYC and your due diligence processes, especially in enhanced due diligence. And I mentioned a moment ago about using it to verify events, verify parts of a story, but there are other purposes to social media that we use in profiling an individual. If you're lucky, you can actually find the person on social media. A lot of the individuals that we research aren't on social media. They don't have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Some do, it really depends. But it's not something that we expect. It's just good to have. But one thing we can do a lot of times, if we do have this, the person's profile, we can identify, for instance, their current country of residence. We can also understand a bit about their lifestyle, which is important to see if it matches up with their source of wealth. What kind of assets do they have? How many properties do they own? You can identify family members. Sometimes you might not identify the subject, but you'll identify his children, his brothers, his wife, and you won't find anything on him, but you'll find that his family members are posting pictures with him. And that can lead you to greater understanding of their lifestyle and things like that. You might even get aliases from this. At times, you'll find that they post a picture and you have a visual of the person you're investigating, and you match it to another series of photos, and you realize that he or she is using a different name, and then you can investigate that name and find a completely different narrative about the subject. So it's extremely important to do. And it's not just limited to the person. You can also look up their their corporations and their affiliate companies, their social media accounts in order to identify their activity and sometimes even determine if it exists, if it exists and what people are saying about it. Because as you'll see later, there's also such thing as kind of companies that only exist online and don't really have any real activity that they claim. And just though I wanted to present like a small example when we were looking at a particular subject and we found through their social media where exactly she stays in the United Kingdom, which is just a small part of understanding their life and their kind of presenting their net worth to our client. But the person actually confirmed that they spend time in this home in the UK, and it was a very valuable part of our research. And just like with regular traditional media, social media also has an element of bias naturally and an element of taking the effort to know your source. It's sometimes a lot harder in social media because these are oftentimes individuals. There could be just general, typical civilians can provide you with a lot of information on social media. So when someone writes something on Twitter, you want to understand who is the account owner. And this is something that you should kind of, sometimes it might take some time to do, but because you're looking at a large volume of accounts, a lot of times you kind of have to determine quickly who is this person. You can look at various things, but some of the ways of measuring this is, looking at who follows them. A very a good way to see it is, for instance, if other journalists follow them, if people with specific leanings follow them, if they're following a very specific type of group. So it can tell you a little bit about their leaning or their angles and the kind of activities they're involved in. You can ask yourself where are they located, and things like that as well. But the important thing is, regardless of how much you can trust the account that you're looking at, you want to corroborate every piece of information about whatever it is that they're saying. And again, a lot of times for us, I showed earlier a Facebook post, but Twitter is useful in our case for people talking about big stories that our clients are involved in and us trying to get to the bottom of it. So it should be useful for you as well. So now that we talked a lot about collecting facts and collecting information, I want to talk a bit more about building context. Because essentially you can have all the facts, but without context of how to place those facts, it means very little. You have to ask why. You have to ask, what else should I know? Every piece of information that you find out about someone or an event, you need to probably dig more outside of that, the source of information, and understand it, its implications. So just a small example I have is that we had a client who asked us to evaluate someone who was found on a terror list. And when looking into it, we found that the person was on a terror list that was only recognized by Turkey. Even though he was flagged, it was one that was not internationally recognized, and it was one that was viewed as very politically motivated. So despite this person being listed, when we understood the context of the listing, by going outside of the listing itself, we realized that this is not something that should prevent doing business with this particular person. So there's a lot of examples I can give. This is something that we do every day. But the main tip I can give you is something my mentor told me a long time ago, is to always be curious, take nothing at face value. If you have any questions about any word that you read or any terminology that you come across, that you need to research it further and leave no stone unturned, and make sure that everything you write, everything you read, you understand it fully. And again, that requires stepping outside of the framework that you did your initial research in. Since I talked a lot about social media, I want to give an example of a time that we actually used social media heavily in one of our source of wealth analyses. And this ties into the reason the person was evaluated in the first place. She was a politically exposed person from Russia, so it made her a high risk. And she also had a lot of money. So through social media, we were able to find out a lot about her activities that kind of gave credibility to her source of wealth. And assuage the fears that she could have been embezzling money from the country. So firstly, she was very popular on social media, and as a result was able to utilize that in order to have to be paid for advertising. So we found, again, going back to also building context, we knew that she was being paid for advertisements on social media. We also did our own evaluation to understand how much does one get paid for those kind of advertisements if this person has this many followers, and it's something you can find out with a bit of extra research. We also found out that she was a co-owner of an advertisement agency, also through her postings on Facebook and Instagram, that she was a master of ceremonies at corporate parties, which she did receive payments for. She also advertised her own merchandiser line, so we saw that stream of income. And also we knew that she had a salary from Russian TV channels for being a host and producer. Now, some of this, of course, we found not through social media, but a large chunk of this we not only found in social media, we either found it there and corroborated it elsewhere, or we found it elsewhere and were able to corroborate it on social media. So you might find this in corporate registries, but then you can also see if it's true and see how active this person is via their social media postings. And this is what I meant earlier when I talked about corroborating all the information that you find. So now we talked about the type of tools that you guys are already most likely exposed to just from your own personal lives, social media and just regular Googling. But I guys showed you that large diagram from Bellingcat about the OSINT tools. I want to introduce you to a couple of them that we use on a regular basis that you might find very useful as well. One of them is the Wayback machine. And this is really neat. Essentially, you can see here that there's a screenshot of Donald Trump's Twitter account after it was suspended. So if you're doing research on a subject that's suspended, for instance, on Twitter, and this is not the only time, you might feel like you ran into a wall. Well, now his posts are all hidden. I can't see what he or she said before. I can't see his or her postings. It's all gone now. But that's not true. And this also goes with websites as well. So on the Wayback machine, it actually archives most sites on the internet, even sites you didn't. You can check your own sites for free online, your own company websites, and find when you can find screenshots of it from years ago. So you can see here, for instance, if you take the 25th of June 2020, the Wayback machine. Now, obviously, Donald Trump's a very popular person, so in this day they took 53 snapshots from his Twitter account alone. So that's a bit high volume, but at the same time, for any news site, if you go to New York Times, BBC, you'll find that every single day there's multiple snapshots of the site, and it's extremely useful. And you'll see why in a moment when I give you a case study. And just to show you that you can actually use it, here's us pulling up Donald Trump's post from before him being banned. So again, we're talking here about social media. I want to share you an example of when we use this to actually resolve a case, or as part of our way of corroborating information about a particular case. So we actually had a client come to us about one of their clients who was listed as the VP of a sanctioned company, which means essentially it was extremely high risk and naturally not someone that they want to do business with. So we looked and did research on the person, and we found that indeed in corporate records and commercial databases, the kind that most people rely on for this sort of information, that he was listed as the VP of a company that was indeed sanctioned. What we did though is we went to the company's website and we found that he is not listed on the website. So naturally, not all VPs will be listed. So we wanted to see if he was ever listed. We actually went into the Wayback machine and looked at the different snapshots of that website and saw that at one point he was, and then he wasn't. So essentially, in the middle of June 2018, the subject of investigation was removed from the website, which indicates that there's a good chance he doesn't work there anymore. It wasn't a mistake that he wasn't listed there. He was actively listed and actively removed. So that through Wayback machine, we got our first lead. Okay, there might be a mistake. And by the way, this is why you do enhanced due diligence. It's exactly this, that even in corporate records and commercial databases, you could have an error that can lead you to not do business with someone who you have no actual reason not to. So, of course, like I said, it's all about corroborating information, triangulating the facts that you come across. So we actually looked into company filings, and we found that he stopped being included in company filings after June 2018. And so that gave us more evidence that he was no longer part of that company. And then we finally went to the source of the information from which his listing of as a VP was included. And we found that it was actually, it was pulled from outdated sources, basically from January 2018. It's a small clerical error, but it can make or break a business. So that's just one example in which the Wayback Machine was exceptionally helpful for us. But when you're researching individuals, it's extremely important to know that you have this tool as backup. We've done this again. This is something that we've done many times to understand someone's affiliations with different companies and different people. The last tool I want to show is actually reverse image searches, and I'll show you how we've used that successfully in the past as well. So there's a number of different ones. I'm sure many of you have heard of Google reverse image search, which is the most popular, but actually Yandex is oftentimes considered better because it has just better algorithms to find similar faces or similar items to what you're searching. And you can see that here. It's not always 100% accurate. As you take someone like this, you put them into Yandex reverse image search, and you see quite a range of faces that are similar, and some of them are not necessarily him, but they're close, and it will still give you good positive results. TinyEye is also a good reverse image search that you should utilize. But again, it's important to know that it's not just Google. If you don't have success with Google reverse image search, go to Yandex, go to TinyEye, and try others out. There's many different solutions. I do want to show you a case where we were successful using Google reverse image search. And that's when we were evaluating this company. We went to their website. And again, this is related to verifying that the company actually exists. Of course, like I said, we have ground source. We can actually send someone to look at the site and tell if it exists, but you can also do this online sometimes. So in this case, we took the picture from the background here because we were rather suspicious about their holding of these facilities, and we put it in reverse image search. Now, even though the images weren't a perfect alignment because of the labels put on the tankers, we found that the image here was actually taken from Shutterstock. It's a stock photo provider. So what happened here was essentially they took this image and they put their label on it and made it seem like they have these facilities. Now, that's not to say that they don't. They very well might. And you guys can think of many reasons that someone would take an image not of their own company and put their label on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have something that looks similar. For instance, many websites, even in our world, have pictures of someone working on a computer that's not actually one of their employees. It's just easier sometimes to take what already exists and to make a new one. So that said, what it does do is it tells you need to look further. You need to dig further to prove to yourself that this company does exist and does have the facilities it claims to have. So, in conclusion, if I were to offer a few points that you should take home, one is that the reason we do enhanced due diligence is that it is necessary to go beyond the surface. I showed you a couple examples of things that are presented, but they're not accurate, and you need to dig further in order to get the confidence that you need to conduct or decide not to conduct business. Another point is that there is a way to find almost anything online. It depends which country you're operating in. In our case, we have a lot of countries where, corporate records and things of that nature, you need to go physically and pick them up. But a lot of countries, they offer documents in person, and a lot of other things that you can find online. Another thing is that you should evaluate sources just to the same level that you evaluate information. Just because it's written online, we all know that doesn't mean it's true. So whatever you're reading, don't just evaluate the information, evaluate who's saying it. And even if you do trust them, just corroborate it as well. And also just remember that there's a lot of talk about biased information, and especially in the kind of countries we research, there's a lot of misinformation. But biased information can also be useful as long as you verify that it's true. And with that, I leave the floor to questions. I'll also, like Chris said, I'll leave our contact information up so you guys can take it, and feel free to reach out to us at any point. We have our emails, our numbers, our website, so we're at your disposal. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So I got a question by mail actually. And I just read them out, and maybe Lev, you can answer them, or I will answer the question. You mentioned using ground sources. How much of what you do requires such sources?
It's a very good question. And I think it also relates to what, so we actually offer various levels of due diligence. We usually have 3 main ones, but we also offer even more enhanced due diligence services. When you're doing the medium and more advanced due diligence services, I'd say in those cases, maybe almost half, sometimes maybe a little bit less than the times you'll need ground sources. That said, it also really depends on the countries that you need to look for. So if you have a subject who operates mostly in Europe, a lot of times you won't need it. It depends on the availability of information. When you're operating in Africa and Asia, the Indian subcontinent, it becomes rather necessary. And again, I would say, so in summary, it depends on the depth of the reporting and the jurisdiction. But for sure, it's helpful. I would also say that it's a part of our report, and it can lead to very valuable information that can really shift the way our report is done. But even without it, we've produced excellent reports.
And another question, can you use WEBINT to find the ultimate beneficial owner? I don't know, do you want to answer this question, or should I?
Go for it, Chris. I love you too.
So yeah, obviously you can identify the UBO by using WEBINT. I mean, in a like a perfect world, the UBO is just the direct shareholder of the company, and in that case, you will definitely be able to identify the UBO just by visiting the public register, for example, of a company. But in some cases, there is the possibility that you won't be able to find out the UBO, and in that case, you either have to rely on ground sources again to obtain those information, or you have to go with that and contact your client or your business partner and ask for these information, and then try to cross-verify these information.
I don't see any more questions here, at least pertaining to the report. Sorry, to the presentation. Someone did ask earlier in the chat if we will share the presentation, and we will. Yes, we'll convert it to a PDF and send it out to the participants. Great.
Thank you.
Any more questions from anyone? Great. Oh, we have one in chat, it seems. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So guys, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Kind of in a way, like also a bit of a launch of Kerberos and the Sqope partnership through this webinar, which is a great way to kind of roll it out, so to speak. You have our contacts. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. Otherwise, it's we'll share the presentation and load the video actually on our website. I thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.